Hello and welcome everybody to the Jerusalem controversy. Today we're going to be tackling an issue that I'm asked the most about to expand on more. I think the modern location is wrong. I think we have a different location than what appears biblically. This would include the Old and New Testament descriptions, essentially, of what's going on. So the first thing that I want to talk about is how I kind of came to this conclusion for myself, how I understood what's going on in the Bible, and then looking at geography, what drove me to this kind of conclusion. So the first time I was exposed to the concept of Jerusalem not being where modern day Jerusalem is, that was several years ago, and someone mentioned it kind of offhand that we don't really know the locations of these areas as well as we think we do, but there's almost always a number of people who are going to side different ways depending on the different source material. And that's what historical forensics is all about, is we're looking at the original source material and saying, okay, how did we get to the conclusion that the source material, which could be a journal or it could be an entry, led us to believe this one thing? Why is it all historians believe this one thing, or is there a difference? So that was brought up in terms of locations. Locations are really hard to pin down because unless you put a giant statue or a monument or it's very close to other landmarks, it's hard to tell. So when I was reading through the scriptures, I simply would look at these things and say, okay, Jerusalem's supposed to be in this kind of location with this kind of climate, with this kind of neighbors. So what does that look like? And where would we find that? So the first one, to begin here in understanding where Jerusalem is, I'm going to just be bringing up a bunch of scriptures that are referencing the way in which they traded with or the different resources that were useful in other countries. So this is during the reign of King Solomon. And so Solomon is building a temple, and he writes to the king of Tyre at this point, Hiram, about getting some stuff from their location, which they're in apparently the region of Lebanon. Ogham trees out of Lebanon, for I know that thy servants, so he's talking to Aram here, thy servants can skill to cut timber in Lebanon, and behold, my servants shall be with thy servants, even to prepare thy timber in abundance. So he's just talking about all the different things he wants to do to get this timber down into Jerusalem. And the king of Tyre answered in writing, which he sent Solomon, because the Lord hath loved his people, he hath made thee king over them. So he said, and he says, yes, of course, I'll send cunning men with understanding, and Hiram, men of Hiram, my father, and the son of women, daughters of Dan, and his father was of Tyre, skillful to work. So talking about this particular individual he's going to send who's skillful in working silver, gold, brass, iron, stone, timber, purple, all the things. He's also a master of engraving. So he's sending all these things. So this is telling you the skill of the workmanship of both Tyre and then the respect commanded by Solomon. Remember, Tyre had dealings with Solomon's father, David. So this is just a really, really good trade move here. Tyre is, or I should say Hiram, the king of Tyre, is trying to ingratiate himself to Solomon. And so that's one of the first things we look at, is they want to be in the good graces of Solomon. First Kings here, so this is the second scripture I'm looking at, 1 King 9. This is talking about Solomon also. This is a reference to Solomon and the naval ships that he had at Ezion-Geber, which is beside Eloth, on the shore of the Red Sea in the land of Edom. So this gives us a lot of clues as to where this navy is located, at the very least. Ezion-Geber is not some place that is agreed upon even today. Eloth is generally considered to be in a specific spot. But the significance here is that he built a navy of ships inside it and put them in the Red Sea. And Hiram sent in the navy his servants, shipmen that had knowledge of the sea, with the servants of Solomon. So what's happening here is he's sending him pilots, people that know the location, know the seas that Solomon wants to go, and he's helping them to navigate. And they came to Ophir and fetched from thence gold, 400 talents, and brought it to King Solomon. So this is a voyage that's being discussed. So there's a plotting a voyage. Solomon says, go make a whole fleet of ships, because we're going to sail to Ophir. Now, Ophir is mentioned many times in the Bible. If you do a cross-coordinate search of that, you'll show, I think, 13 different times it's mentioned. Ophir always in congruence with gold, silver, foreign animals, monkeys, things like that, and being brought back. So it's a very rich land, and that is kind of our question in that area. No one knows where Ophir is, and we're going to get to that. But this is another instance where you see Solomon is making this trip just to go get riches. A pretty long trip, evidently. He built an entire navy of ships, put them in the sea, and Hiram sent a bunch of pilots or naval men who knew the way they were going. And we know that Tyre traded with Ophir regularly. They had pretty good records that they kept of their trades with Ophir. So this is something where Solomon is like, hey, you guys are always trading with this country. Now I want to do it. So do me a favor and send some men here. So it doesn't say the exact price that was paid. I'm assuming there was some price that was paid for those men to travel with him. But he's giving this knowledge to Solomon, that this is how you get to this place, the land of Ophir, and this is how you get all these riches. So this is another instance of Tyre, Hiram, king of Tyre, collaborating with Solomon to do some pretty impressive stuff. This is not low-level things. These are pretty serious journeys. We'll come back to Ophir in just a bit. But I want to really discuss kind of the landmark of what's going on. So this is jumping ahead to Nehemiah. So we're in Nehemiah, and if you don't know the scripture very well, basically Solomon kind of ends up splitting the kingdom up. Not really, but basically over several kings, the kingdom is divided into two nations. There's Jerusalem in the south with Judah, and then there's the 10 nations of the north, or the 10 tribes of the north, and they're kind of scattered, and all of them are taken into captivity. And then after a while, only the tribe of Judah returns down back to Jerusalem, and they start building the walls there. So the walls they're building, this passage in Nehemiah deals with the specifics of how they're building the wall and the landmarks around them. So a lot of Jerusalem was destroyed when the Babylonians took over, and now a lot of it's being built back up. So this is what this is dealing with. So kind of a jump ahead in the history of Israel, and it's just, again, we're just giving landmarks and understanding of what's going on. So this is a much less fabled time. This is a much impoverished time where people are just returning and starting to build Jerusalem again. So it talks about, and this whole chapter is just talking about different parts of the wall, different people. And so it comes to this portion. It says, moreover, the Nethians dwelt in Ophir, which is not Ophir, by the way. It's Ophir. It's a little subsect. It's like a borough, basically. Unto the place over against the water gate toward the east, and the tower that lieth out. So this portion here is really important. It gives us a clear landmark that there is a water gate. So there's a gate with water running through it. In other parts, people have speculated that over 90% of the water that was in Jerusalem came through the water gates, which would be a lot of water, or this particular water gate, not plural. And it's going to be on the east side. So on the east side of Jerusalem, there's a gate for water and a tower that is, it says lieth out. That kind of means like just out of pace from it. So probably on the other side of the water gate. After the Tekotites repaired another piece against over the great tower that lieth out, even into the wall of Ophir. So these are two different towers. There's a great tower and a regular tower. So we're looking at a water gate and a tower. So two towers, basically. A big tower, a smaller tower, and a water gate. So this tells us a lot about what this place must be like. Now, all of the gates have names like this. There's the sheep gate, which is where the sheep are traded. There's, again, this is right below here, the horse gates, repaired by the priests. A lot of these gates have names like this. So there's many gates into Jerusalem. We're looking at a thing that has gates on all different sides, and there's different things that come and go. Way in the future, and this may or may not be relevant, but in Acts, Tyre is still there. So this is in the New Testament. So this is a long time after the establishment here. This is during Roman rule. And in Roman rule, Tyre is kind of fizzling out, I would say. And we're going to talk about Tyre a little more in the history and how it relates. But this is on the later end when Tyre is also subject to Rome. So once they've been conquered, Jerusalem's been conquered. All this is under Roman rule, but Rome left their own individuals, governors, and rulers. So there's a disagreement that's going on. Tyre and Sidon, which are two most often mentioned together, they're the same people, but Tyre is the capital and Sidon is another great city nearby. They came with one accord to Herod, who's the kind of the king of Jerusalem during this time period. And having made Blastus, the king's chamberlain, their friend, desired peace. So this is after a period of frustration between Tyre and Sidon and then the Romans and their tetrarchs here. So they're wanting peace because their country was nourished by the king's country. And upon a set day, Herod arrayed in royal apparel, sat in his throne, and made an oration unto them. So the relevance here is simply that we're understanding that Tyre and Sidon, even in the time of Jesus and after that, relied on Jerusalem's areas, because Herod is king over Jerusalem, which would be that Israel area. He is supplying them with food. Tyre and Sidon don't have as much crops as they do trade. So we're kind of seeing this, that in other portions of the Bible, it talks about them coming in and trading at Jerusalem. And one of the biggest strengths of Tyre as a nation was their trademarks. They had many trades and many accesses to different kinds of spices and exotic materials. For instance, they sailed to Ophir. They were some of the first people to sail to Ophir. And they got all these exotic animals, and they would trade them at different locations. One of the most important places for them would be any place that has a crossroads of worlds, any place where things are really important for trading lots of different people, because that's where they're going to make a lot of their money. And then they also have to have good trade relations with a nation that is fertile, that produces a lot of food, because they don't have a lot of food. They're mostly a naval nation. Here's another reference. So back in Nehemiah, we were in Nehemiah, we're talking about the Watergate, and then in Acts, we're talking about how basically Tyre doesn't produce its own food necessarily. And so then we come to another part in Nehemiah, and it's talking about the frustrations of the people, how they're not observing the correct laws. On the Sabbath day, it's unlawful to trade. It's unlawful to change money. So here we have an issue. So this is Nehemiah speaking. In those days, I saw in Judah some treading wine presses on the Sabbath, so making wine, and bringing in sheaves and lading asses, and also wine, grapes, and figs, and all manner of burdens. So they're loading up their animals and bringing them in, even if they're not necessarily selling them. The problem here is they're doing the work to get ready to sell. They're not resting like they should. And I testified against them in the day wherein they sold victuals. There dwelt men of Tyre also therein. So they lived there. They were men of Tyre, but they were living there, which brought fish and all manner of ware, and sold on the Sabbath day unto the children of Judah and in Jerusalem. So here is a problem that's happening, but it also gives us an insight. People of Tyre were selling fish and all manner of ware, so kind of like exotic things. This fits with our understanding that they're bringing in fish, but why fish? Clearly because they're a naval nation. They have exotic fishes, dried fishes, all kinds of different things. But also Tyre are known to be the most skilled fishermen. So it's conceivable that they're better at fishing than even the people in Jerusalem, those of the tribe of Judah. So it could be that they're just better at it, and so they're selling the fish that they're caught right there in Jerusalem. They're selling them to these people. So this, I think, gives us a really good understanding of Tyre and Jerusalem. They're nations of similar size, nations that have a similar strength, but in different areas. Jerusalem is a very centralized location that has a lot of trade, which is why it's so valuable to Tyre, because they need to be able to trade in those areas. It also highlights that Jerusalem is a land of much growing. They have all kinds of food, whereas Tyre is a nation which has not so much the infrastructure for agriculture, but is more reliant on trade and naval operations. We know they're masters of naval things. So we're going to look at some of the other things. So this is a history of Tyre here, and we're going to be looking at some of the different areas because it's going to give us more insight. I think insight into Tyre is going to be more useful than not for other things. So here we see the David and Tyrrhenian connection becoming prominent. Hiram, king of Tyre, offered cedar trees, carpenters, and masons to build David's palace. These were free offerings, so Tyre was literally saying, hey, this is the beginning of our relationship. You're a great, huge nation, equal to us, or even larger, and we want to be ingratiated with you. So they offered them these things for free, and then later on, they established a much more balanced trade essentially. So the trade that goes on later is much more in favor of Tyre, because when Solomon buys things from them, they charge him full price. And we even see the king Hiram kind of complaining a little bit about the collateral. And this is just a link kind of for understanding. Yeah, so this history kind of goes on, and then Nebuchadnezzar comes of Babylon. He besieges Tyre. So this is the same time after the relationship with Solomon, Tyre kind of falls too. So this is the only part that really concerns us, is just kind of understanding that there was acts of ingratiation happening to those. This is the historical map of the Phoenicians, or Phoenicia. So Phoenicia started in Tyre. Tyre is the capital of Phoenicia. A lot of people kind of glaze over this fact. But yeah, if we look over here, we can see that in this kind of modern day, what we would call Israel area, Tyre actually owns most of the coast here, all that little colored in. They have Cyprus, Lacatinia, Berytos, Babos, Aretos, Tyre, obviously, Sidon as well. And then if we look over across to the Strait of Gibraltar, and we look across at Spain, Sardinia, they have a huge empire here. At the same time that they're developing this, we have to keep in mind the Roman Empire on the north side of the Mediterranean is also starting. So Carthage, which would be the primary rival for Rome, was actually founded as a colony of Tyre. And so you can see where they get all of these massive trade embargoes. They have the Strait of Gibraltar that belongs to them. They're doing massive trade there. They have positions over all of these different islands in the Mediterranean, and they own the northern coast of Africa, this very fertile, at that time, very fertile area. The legend is that Carthage was one of the most fertile lands until supposedly Rome sowed salt in the soil, which is kind of weird. I'm not sure if I believe that, but either way, that's how the theory goes, is basically that the Phoenicians kind of just really owned the southern Mediterranean, a very fertile land, and they traded all the exotic spices and things like that. One of the places they did a lot of trading was in Greece, Anatolia, and up into Turkey. We're aware of those anyway. The other place is Ophir. So now we come to Ophir, and we have a little bit more to talk about with Tyre, but Ophir becomes really important now. So where is Ophir, this land of gold, this land of various things? Jerusalem wanted to go there. Tyre had already been there. So where was it? Well, this is where things get a little complicated. We're going to go over to Google Maps because we're going to have a look at this area here. So this is the Jordan, Lebanon area. So Tripoli, this is kind of the Tyre area. Tyre owned this whole coast all the way down to essentially Ashdod or Tel Aviv Yafo. And so the direction we're given for where Solomon was when he was setting out for Ophir is down here. This is Eliat, is typically considered the town that was referenced. So the one that we think we know where it is Eliat. And then the other ones we're not really sure where they are. Certainly not Ophir. So the thought is he had a fleet down here because this is a tip of the Red Sea in the Gulf of Aqaba here. And as far as Ophir goes, there's competing thoughts. One thought is that Ophir is down here by Maga or Tayyab Elisim. So these are proposed locations, but they lack a lot of the qualifiers. So St. Jerome and Josephus, the historian, both agreed that that Ophir was actually in India. So they thought, and they animated that Ophir was down here by Kochi, in this kind of area here. Now, they're not the only ones that thought that, but they're the primary ones who propagated that thought. It's more recent historians who have said, well, we don't think they could have sailed that far, so then we're going to say they must have been closer. The other competing thought early on in the church was that it was talking about some North Africa areas. They thought Somalia, so Mogadishu area, or potentially Ethiopia in here in Djibouti. So these two areas, the reason that we don't think that these are the locations modernly they don't have the animals that are listed. So the animals that are specifically listed as being traded, like monkeys, peacocks, not in Africa. Yes, thank you. And some ivory and things like that only exist over here in India. They don't exist in the North Africa. Now, they could have back then. We don't really know. But generally speaking, they don't now. So that's why the thought is that, and this is probably the least weird or least outlandish take, is that Ophir is actually on the coast of India. So we have a sailing from the Jordan area here all the way out to this area down in here. And that holds with navigation needed. My biggest issue with the thought of Ophir being right down here is that why would you need a fleet of ships to go that distance? Because if we look at this, we can see, well, you guys can't see it, but basically it's only about 60 or 70 miles from Hakil down to Rash al-Sheikh Hamid. So why would you need a ship when you just walked more than that from Jerusalem to get down to Aqaba in the first place? So why would you walk some 80 miles, build ships, and then sail another 20 miles? If you walk the 80 miles, you just walk further down. But that's not the only issue. The other issue is that if that were the case, why would you need pilots who are super skilled? The Gulf of Aqaba is not particularly, the Gulf of Aqaba is not particularly treacherous. All waterways are dangerous, right? But you wouldn't necessarily need trained sailors to teach you how to go through these waters. If you had the skill to build a fleet, you would be totally fine just sailing south here. However, if you plan to cross over the Gulf of Aden, over the Arabian Sea, into the Gulf of India here, it's not really a gulf, obviously, but these are treacherous areas, and sailing across here is dangerous. If you don't follow up and go through Yemen and Oman and off the Gulf of Oman, if you don't stick close to the coast, you could very easily get lost. But the fastest way is a straight, more or less straight line across this ocean here. You would need very skilled navigators who'd made that route before. So that's why I think that that Josephus and Saint Jerome were correct when they said that India is the location. If we look at this, so I actually verified this in the Encyclopedia Britannica that is available to me, because I don't trust Wikipedia. I'm showing Wikipedia just because it has names, but this is not where I got my source. My source I actually pulled from Encyclopedia Britannica. But yeah, there's different people who say different areas, and the exact area is Puvar. That's supposedly. But then also the Philippines is another place where this is said to have been. So this one here, the General Archive of the Indies, found in Spain, has a document that describes how to locate the land of Ophir. The navigational guide starts from Cape of Good Hope in Africa to India, Burma, Sumatra, Molucca Islands, Borneo, Sulu, China, and finally Ophir, which is speculated to be in the Philippines. So that's this. And like I said, I verified that as well. So there's another thought that it could be as far even out as the Philippines, which I don't need to tell you would be even harder. That kind of navigation is just really difficult to go from Saudi Arabia essentially all the way to the Philippines. So this would be a serious issue. Either way, whether it's in India or the Philippines, what we're getting the picture of here is a navy that was virtually global. A navy that could go almost anywhere in the world. So the people of Tyre, being a naval people, had all of the South Mediterranean Sea, and then they also sailed all the way to Ophir prior to that. Now, regardless of if you think that... so I'll lay another one on you. I think that the Suez Canal was actually dug at this point. I think there was. It maybe didn't look like this, but I think there was a waterway that went from Port Said to Suez, or maybe from Mansoura over to Suez, to get into the Gulf of Suez. It doesn't make sense to me why they wouldn't. If the people of Tyre, which is up here in Lebanon, sailed their ships all the way to Ophir, even if, let's say, they did sail out through the Strait of Gibraltar over here, and went all the way around Africa, down Cape Town, most dangerous place, second most dangerous crossing in the entire world is down here at Cape Town, and sailed up into Indonesia and Philippines and India, and sailed all the way back. Even if they did do that once, I don't think it would take them very long to figure out, hey, it's actually better to go down through the Gulf of Aqaba. So whether or not, I guess I should say this again, whether or not the canal actually existed, I think there was naval traffic through the Gulf of Suez, Gulf of Aqaba. Even if they had to port their ships or build entire fleets starting there, it would be way more efficient to build your ships down here and then sail this way. Regardless, if you don't think that happened, then you must think that Tyre was, quite literally a global nation. They had the ability to sail then all the way around South Africa, because we know they went to Ophir, and it seems like all legitimate sources point to Ophir being in India or the Philippines, the very least Africa. So this is a serious problem if you think that these countries were small, little, dinky countries that really just took up tiny land masses. So we're getting this picture of Jerusalem, a nation of equal size and power to Tyre. Tyre being a global naval force, being able to trade pretty much continentally. Jerusalem must have been equal. So the question is, where is a location that is so central to trade in the world that Tyre, which had the opportunity to ally with Rome, Egypt, India, which at that time was a pretty prosperous area, the Philippines, if they had the opportunity for all those things, but they made their trade home, they made it so important that they gave gifts to Israel, then that would mean that Israel is located at the best trade area pretty much in the world. It has to be a centralized trade location. It has to be an area that everyone wants to be in for trade. It has to be an area with a large amount of water, fish nearby, and it also needs to correspond to the towers and gates that we talked about. So this is kind of where I realized, and this was where I began my search, this doesn't fit. If you go to Jerusalem today, if you look at the various pictures, there's no water gates, there's one tower, and they can't even find the foundations of the other towers that are mentioned in Nehemiah. There's 3 towers total mentioned, 2 in the passage that I read earlier, and there's another one mentioned as well. And they can't even find the foundations of any but one, and it doesn't line up because it technically could be one of the other towers, but they haven't found any towers near Watergate because they really haven't found a Watergate. They found areas that they say are the Watergate, and I've looked into them, and I don't see how you could call that a Watergate. They don't have the number of gates that are listed in the rebuilding of the wall in Nehemiah, because there's a horse gate, fish gate, the water gate, there's a couple other gates, and it doesn't add up. And then the other aspect is no towers. So this just doesn't seem like a probable location. On top of that, it's in the worst trade position really in the world. Anyone who wants to trade could easily go around this area and wouldn't necessarily even want to use it. So if we look at Lebanon, their trade is actually better. So the Damascus Road, geographically speaking, is a better trade area than pretty much anywhere else down in what we would call the modern Jerusalem or Jordan area. There's nothing over here in the Syria-Iraq area that would really want to trade this way, going to the coast. The coast doesn't go anywhere. If you want to trade with Egypt, almost everyone would go up here to Aleppo or to Lebanon area, Tripoli. And the reason for that, the reason they would go there, is because they have access to seaports there immediately, and they don't have to traverse the very difficult mountains that you find in the modern-day Jerusalem area. There's a lot of mountains around this area that are frustrating. There's a whole range of them, so you can really only go through the Dead Sea, which is also not easy to traverse. So going through the valley here where Jordan runs, which, by the way, isn't a river most of the year, but, going through here is not easy, and you would end up in the Gulf of Aqaba, which is accessible from the east much easier. So if you were a Syrian and you wanted to trade, and let's say you had to go by land, and you wanted to trade with Egypt, you would go straight south through the desert here, oasis to oasis, where it's flat, until you come into this area, Jordan, and then you would cut across below where this mountain range ends into Wadi Musa area, down to Aqaba, and then you could cross over into Egypt if you wanted to go that way. That would actually be faster than going through Jerusalem. So I don't see how Jerusalem can be considered the trade center of the world, where Tyre considered to be the best possible location for trade. And that's what leads me to say, well, where is? And there is a place that's talked about by every nation. Everyone knows it's the trade center, and that would be, Istanbul. And so it could take a little bit of frustration here, because a lot of people go, Istanbul, no, that can't be. It has a history. It has all these things. There's an entire another video that I could make that would deal with the timeline conflictions, which is something I'm interested in as well, because it's true, you have to harmonize the timelines. But there are a lot of timeline conflictions, and this is where, what I mentioned at the beginning, the historical forensics becomes so important, understanding what was actually said versus what historians have quote-unquote harmonized when they say, oh, this thing must mean this thing because this thing over here said this other thing. They're playing a lot of games, but more importantly than all of that, this just fits the location, and I trust the Bible over pretty much all historical texts. Now, I realize I'm talking a lot about Tyre and what Tyre did, and they have historical texts, but it's backed up by the scriptures, and that's why I'm trusting some of what is being said there. I don't trust everything in these articles, but where it's talking about trade that's backed up by scripture, I think that's a pretty good, reliable source. So if we look at Istanbul itself, we actually, the country, or the city, I should say, is basically on this little island here, and we have a really interesting, profound phenomenon, which is that the waterway here flows into this area, and they actually, to this day, have a water gate here. This is a bridge, but they actually have a fish gate, a literal gate that allows fish in and out of this area, and they can also shut down the trade up this little fork. So this connects the two seas together. This river does. It's not really a river, it's kind of a strait. But anyway, this connects the Black Sea down here to the Sea of Marmara, and there is a spur that comes off it in between two towers. So there's the Kuzuluzi. So this is an ancient tower called the Maiden's Tower, and this is a tower on the coast here. And then right across from that is Galata Kulesi. And Galata Kulesi is another ancient tower that is built right across from the fish gate that faces east. So to me, we can look at this and go, well, that's lining up perfectly. Here's these ancient towers that are still standing. We have a water gate here, a gate that water passes through. And if Jerusalem, which in my mind is over here on this lower portion, this lower little peninsula, then it makes sense that 90% of the water comes in through these gates, because this is how they're going to get their stuff. As far as the third tower goes, we have here a great tower. So this is an interesting one. If we look at this, it's not showing me the picture very well. There we go. So this is another ancient structure. And you can look into these all you want, and there's lots of different histories about them. But when you start studying what people have said about them, it's pretty clear to tell no one really knows enough about these, in my opinion, to really talk about when they were built. You can say, oh, it was built in, 1350. Was it? Anyway, the point is just here we have more towers, more of these colonnades, water features. So there's only 3 primary pillars or towers that are talked about, but that doesn't mean there aren't more towers. And if you go all over Istanbul, you find towers. You also find underground aqueducts. You find all kinds of wells. This is the most civilized place maybe on the planet in terms of infrastructure. It has more infrastructure than Rome does in terms of the aqueducts, in terms of the great, huge underground aquifers that were built. I forget what they call those. There's a specific word for them when it's an aquifer that's man-made. Cistern. They have these huge cisterns, just under the entire city. This is a place that is also militarily defensible. You really can't be assaulted. You have this great waterway protecting 3 sides. And then also it fits with the descriptions that are given in Genesis. In Genesis, we're told of several different regulators, one of which being the Euphrates River. A lot of people say, oh, well, Israel has to be west of the Euphrates, right? Makes sense. Well, the thing is that the Euphrates, which, what does it appear? It's always fun trying to find rivers on these kinds of maps. I think this is, here's the Euphrates. So I actually spent like an hour and a half the other day following this. And the Euphrates travels all the way up through the entirety of Turkey and comes out at Trabzon. Now, this river is not called Euphrates because when the waterway gets to the top, up here near Erzincan, it splits. There's like a continental divide. The water runs one way and another way, but there's a pool up here where it starts. But that's all the same river. It's all one waterway from Trabzon all the way down and through to Syria and Iraq. So, yes, the Euphrates goes all the way up here, and then if you go west, you have this entire land over here. So it's my belief then that Israel was in Istanbul, but the land of Israel was literally all of Turkey, because that river also is the river that divides Armenia from Turkey. Not modern-day Armenia, because modern-day Armenia obviously is this right here. But in the past, that has been the dividing line of Armenia versus Turkey. And so it's my understanding then that this would all be considered Israel. And this is some of the most rich, fertile lands you can find. Some of it's mountainous, but a lot of it is really good. It's especially good for growing grapes, and the southern area for wheats. And we know that Israel was famous for both grapes and wheats. And then also, this is fantastic sheep pasture. The mountainous areas up here in Kilyuth Elikisiyar, these are wonderful sheep herding areas. And then if you go north, I think the kingdom probably extended as far as most of Bulgaria. And so you have this nation that's very large, that is centered at the trade center of the world. And you consider how powerful Tyre is, which is down here in the Beirut, Tripoli area. They're going to want to trade with a nation that is every bit as powerful as them, but has an advantage. Jerusalem has no advantages as a city compared to Tyre. Tyre is strictly better situated, has more natural resources, and also is easier to get to. So it doesn't make a lot of sense that they would trade with Jerusalem, because Jerusalem has nothing to offer the city of Tyre. However, if they are owning this coast here, which there is natural resources in this area, they're just not very many, especially when compared to over here, other Tripoli, right? Tripoli over there, Tripoli over here, Tunisia, Tunis, Malta. These are wonderful areas, Algiers, Gibraltar. So if Tyre has all that, they're going to want to trade, and the center of all trade in the world is Istanbul until recently, because it's the crossroads of everything. You have Europe, you have Asia, you have Africa. All of these kind of come together in this one culmination. So this is what brought me to this position. And then what happens is if you are looking at it from this perspective now, you're saying, okay, it's in Turkey, let's read the New Testament. And this is what I encourage you to do. It's not that this is going to point to 100% of a verification for you, but if you're reading the New Testament, count how many times it talks about crossing the Sea of Galilee, how dangerous the sea is. Everywhere they go, they're crossing the Sea of Galilee. They talk about sailing a lot. And the Sea of Marmara is a maritime paradise. It's turbulent, has frustrating waters, but it has trades all the way around. If you're a fisherman, this is heaven for you. You are fishing everywhere because there's so many coastlines to fish off of, which is really good fishing. You don't necessarily fish in the deep. There are some modern techniques for that, but typically you're casting nets in various areas where you know the depth, and this is just perfect. Now, contrast that with the Sea of modern-day Galilee. If you contrast that with the Sea of modern-day Galilee, it's kind of pitiful. The sea is okay, I guess. But this is not the sea of a nation that has a huge navy, has the ability to sail across the world, and certainly there's nothing you could produce on the Sea of Galilee that's really worthwhile for trading across the world. There are some things, but not a lot. However, if you look at the Sea of Marmara, it's wonderful. This is a fantastic trade area, something that is perfect. So when God talks about giving a promised land, a land that's perfect, the best land in the world to his people Israel, is he talking about a strip of, I don't want to say desert, but that's kind of what it is. A strip of desert that holds no strategic value and no real reason for anyone to go there? Or is he talking about the cradle of trade, the literal antithesis of uselessness? This is perfect land that just by living there you would become obscenely wealthy. If you could simply inhabit it, you become just crazy wealthy. And this is the problem. When Israel first came into the land of Canaan, when they first came in, what do they say? It's populated by giants, these mighty people. Why were the most mighty people in the world living here? Because this was the most mighty region. It had the most trade. You could just live here and you wouldn't even have to try and you would thrive, provided your borders are secure. That's why the people there were so warlike, so geared up for wars, because everyone wanted this land. And so God gives it to his people. He doesn't give them the trashiest part. He gives them the best of the best. And this area is the best of the best. So one more thing I want to touch on before I end this is just the porches at the Pool of Bethesda. If you're not familiar, the Pool of Bethesda is an area where Christ healed a lame man. So we're going to just have a quick look. I'm going to clear up a little bit of the bar here. And we're going to actually look through this kind of together. So we're going to go Pool of Bethesda. So this is Wikipedia again. I don't like Wikipedia, but it's going to give us a little bit of that. Bible New Testament, John 5, verse 2. Account of Jesus healing a paralyzed man at the Pool of Bethesda, right? So the interesting thing here is, here it is. Here's what I want. Here's this picture, okay? So this is supposedly the Pool of Bethesda. Now the kicker is the Pool of Bethesda, whenever the water comes up and is turbulent, the Bible says that whoever got in the water was healed of whatever infirmity they had. Now, the Bible, I believe, is true and accurate, so I believe that's what happened. I don't think this was a superstition. I think there was literally a supernatural healing that would go on. How often? I don't know. But this is the thing. People would camp for just everywhere. They would go there if they had a disease or an illness that they couldn't cure. They would camp at the pool and wait and try to be the first one in. We're told in the account that it has 5 porches. Which is interesting. So porches, a lot of us think of porches as, our front porch, but that's not exactly what the Bible is talking about here. So the word porch comes from a Greek word, and the only other time this word is used in the New Testament is describing Solomon's porch. Solomon's porch was a causeway with multiple levels. His porch was on the top. It was a huge area. So a lot of times people interpret the porch to mean these pillars. They say each pillar is a porch, and that there were 5 pillars like that are arches like this. There was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's what a lot of people say. I disagree. I think there were 5 stories to it. There were 5 levels. This is supported because the man that Jesus healed, it says he was far from the pool, and Jesus walked up to him and said, "Do you want to be healed? Do you want to be made whole?" And he said, "I have no one to carry me down to the pool. So by the time the water turbulence, other people have gotten in, and I'm not going to be healed." This is harmonized with the concept of multiple floors. If his family dropped him off, let's say, or when he was well enough to walk, he placed himself, there was no room on the ground floors, he placed himself on the upper floors, but now he can't even get down the stairs. He can't get down to be healed. Compared to here, this picture we have, I'm not sure where he would be hiding out. I mean, if you were anywhere in here, it's a tiny little ravine, and there's other pictures of this you can find online, but it's a tiny little area. If you were in there at all, you could kind of just roll into the pool. So I don't think this is the Pool of Bethesda. However, so here's a nice painting of the Pool of Bethesda. It's interesting. Which we kind of get a different, so this is the angel that supposedly turbulent the water. So this in my opinion is the silly little depiction. It's a tiny little pool. Look, there's like 3 people around here. Hello, these are supernatural waters that can heal you, and you're telling me there's like 4 people here. So we're looking for step wells in Turkey. This is what a step well is. This one's not in Turkey. This one's in India. Stuff like this. This, in my opinion, is what we're looking for. Now, these are in India. Isn't it interesting that India has lots and lots of step wells? And it's supposedly kind of a backwater. But step wells can be found all over the earth. Here's another step well. And so the question is, do we find things like this? Here's another amazing step well. This is huge. Look at the size of this thing. Yeah. So again, this is an Indian step well. Just amazing. Amazing. And so this is kind of more the concept we're looking at. But we don't find things under the name step wells, but if we look up baths, we actually have a lot of these ancient baths in Turkey. So this is a Turkish bath here. And this is an ancient structure. Origins of Turkish baths date back to again, see, it says here 14th century during the Ottoman Empire. I don't believe that, obviously. And like I said, we could talk about the time issues later, but I'm just going to tell you right now, it says that, yes, I don't believe it. I believe it's older than that. But here we have, I realize this has been revamped, probably with modern plumbing, but still, you have this great, amazing structure would have multiple stories. And this is more of what I'm thinking when I think about the Pool of Bethesda. And these are places that are in Turkey today. And this is beautiful. This is Haman. This is beautiful as well. The point just being that we don't find sites like these ones in Israel, but we do find them all over India, Istanbul. I don't know about Bulgaria. I haven't been there. Even in Armenia and Azerbaijan. So that's kind of like, to me, that's the cherry on the cake right there. We're looking at things, and when we look at them in the New Testament, and we try to kind of harmonize it with this hole in the ground in the desert over here, it never really works out. We're looking for particular things that line up, and they just don't. We don't have the towers, we don't have the wells, we have these little dinky structures that realistically don't look grandiose. And people say, oh, well, that's because they're very, very old. But the ruins that exist over in Tyre to this day, which are the same time period, look wonderful. If you look at these places in India that date back to the same time period, they're beautiful still. So why is it that only in Jerusalem these places degrade and turn into these nasty looking rubbles that are not beautiful? But even in places like Turkey, they still have these beautiful things. And you can say, oh, well, that's because they were built more recent in Turkey, because they say they were. But realistically, the architecture styles are similar enough to the ones of the time period in Tyre that still exist to this day. So, in conclusion, this is simply my understanding of the information at the time. I would say I pretty firmly believe in this at this point. Just because every time I see new evidence, it's added in, and it seems to harmonize really well with the Jerusalem taking place in the Istanbul area. That being said, not everyone is going to like this or necessarily believe this, and that's fine. That doesn't bug me. This video is not to make people believe what I believe or to suddenly understand things in a new light. It's just that I mentioned this to some people, and they want to know, where's your source on this? What can I look up at home? Because I don't want to spend all my time necessarily always explaining this. Not that it's a trouble to explain, but it just takes up a lot of time to lay out all of the elements and kind of explain what's going on. And people ask me, oh, well, where can I look this up? Where can I see it? So this is where it's going to be now, and so people can watch it on their own time and then decide on their own. And, you don't ever have to talk to me about it. If you see me, you don't have to say, oh, hey, I watched your video and I disagree with this point. If you don't want to, don't worry about it, okay? I'm an argumentative type. But it's not necessary to, refute every little thing. If you just don't believe it, that's fine. That's not a problem. Because the truth is, there's nowhere in the Bible that says Jerusalem is in Istanbul. I'm reading the evidence, just like people before me have read the evidence for different areas. I like to use the Ophir example, because Ophir is a place that no one really knows where it is. But we've had people in the church history who have said really adamantly, yeah, this is the spot. We've looked into it. This is where it is. And with people in the modern history that say, no, this is where it is. Why is one more valid than the other? Realistically, they're not. You just have to look at things for yourselves and decide what it is that you want to believe. Thanks. I'm now going to take any questions. So if anyone has questions about things here or wants to address points that they feel like I'm really weak on, then you can go ahead and drop those in the chat, and I'll address them, or maybe I won't address them if I have literally nothing. Things I think I've forgotten, or things that may be a problem for this. Side note, I'm not really interested in timeline-related things. Like I said, I kind of have my own timeline. I don't trust official timelines, so I'm not necessarily going to argue like, oh, this timeline versus that timeline, because I have my own harmonized one, and it would just run too long for me to try to explain the timeline of the world as I see it. But if there's any other questions related to just the geography of this or different scriptural texts that maybe reference different things, you can go ahead and let me know about that. I'd be more than happy to answer any of those kind of questions. Just a little bit sick, so I'm going to use a cough drop. Cool. No questions is always the best, because then I don't have to think very much. But I think probably the biggest kind of like homework essay on this one, if anyone's like interested in where they can find more of this, is just go look at Google Maps, find areas in Istanbul, and just start street walking. Like, it's kind of fun. I don't know if this particular one does the street view. I've not done it on my computer, so I don't know. But on my phone, I do it all the time. I just street view and just walk around Istanbul and look at ancient buildings. It's like, here's an old building, there's an old building, and it's just beautiful. I mean, things like this, Kyrie Kamal. It's supposed to be a mosque. Obviously, I don't believe it's a mosque. I mean, look at it. Look at this. That's just beautiful. And this is the interesting thing about mosques. So we look at this picture here, and they'll say, oh yeah, that's because it was updated by, the Christians. It's a mosque that has clearly ancient Christian murals on it. I mean, we're looking at it, right? And people will just say, oh, well, that's just because the Christians came in and repurposed the mosque. Well, then where's the evidence that it was ever a Muslim mosque? Like, where's the evidence it was a Muslim building? In my opinion, when someone says mosque, they're referring to the architecture type. But, like, there's no evidence in the building itself that would suggest that this was a Muslim-originated building, or that it was a specifically Muslim building. Yeah, it's the same. I mean, did I say Jesus? Maybe I did. Regardless, it's clearly European, Christian murals on the interior of this thing. Like, there's no way you can deny that these are Christian. But they say, oh, this is a mosque. It's like, okay. And they tore out all of the Muslim... Well, to be fair, Muslims are iconoclasts, so maybe they didn't have any. But regardless, why would they do all this and not decorate it? It's just blank canvas, and then Christians come in and write their stuff in it? Like, I don't know. That doesn't make sense to me. You didn't say Jesus. I was just lying with the fact that it's called a mosque. Yeah, exactly. And in fact, most mosques that supposedly the Moors built, if you look at them, they have Christian icons inside. Almost all mosques do, except some of those in the Middle East to this day. But, like, this is just wild to me. So, like, if you look at this is just beautiful. And this is kind of stuff I like looking at. It's like, here's clearly a temple. And I won't argue, the architecture here, actually, from this angle, doesn't look definitively Islamic. If you look at it from the outside, yeah, I don't know. The point is, you can just look at all kinds of stuff like this. And also all the letters that were written to the church. If only we had a technical ability to build beautiful structures like that. Yeah, I agree. It would be really amazing. But what's interesting to me also is that all of the towns that the New Testament letters were circulated in took place in this area over here. Baravimivik, this is where, Ephesus is. Izmir, I believe, is Ephesus. It's either Ephesus or Colossae. I can't remember. But, like, these areas here is where most of the apostles did their work. And that's a really long way from Jerusalem down here. I realize it doesn't really matter. It's just interesting to me that the heart of Christianity, the heart of religion, has always been Istanbul. Even when it was Constantinople, the heart of Rome, Like, that's another thing. Why was being king over Jerusalem in the Roman world super, super important? Why did people value that? Seems like, to me, it would kind of be a backwater to be stuck over here. But if you're over here, that's like a huge honor. This is a really great place. If you're a Roman and you want to rule over an area, this is a great area to rule over. But regardless, most of the letters of the New Testament, most of the epistles, take place in this area. which I just find weird. If the center of religious experience is in Jerusalem, why wouldn't it be very close to Jerusalem? Well, in my opinion, it is. It's right here. This is where the early church started. This is the first century church was here. All these great buildings, they might not have been built by the Christians, but they might have been. I don't know. But there's a lot of them here in the Istanbul area. They don't always show up here, but there's a lot of different really cool things. In fact, I think it's this one here. If I look at some of the pictures on this one, the Maiden's Tower, it just has some beautiful views. Oh, look at that. I mean, this is clearly some more recent Christian art, I think. This is also a really cool picture. This is, it's just cool. It's kind of interesting. This isn't the one I was looking for, but here's a really cool view. I like this, looking out at the across the bay there. And yeah, maybe I'm looking at a shot from, I think, across from the other direction, so maybe it's another tower. I get lost here. Oh, I think it's over here, maybe. As another ancient structure here, the Domobalish Palace. Look, and if you guys know anything about cymatic gardens, if you watched Iwaranon, this stuff should look familiar to you. I mean, look at this. This is like the Arc de Triomphe in France. It's got, if you look at the interior of the arch, you can see the cymatic shapes and beautiful things there. So, like I said, if you have watched our Iwaranon stuff, I'm not going to get into it here, but the cymatic shapes are very important for power generation and some other things. And, yeah, this is just a lot of really cool, in my opinion, really cool stuff. And here's another one leading into the palace. Just beautiful architecture. And I realize we're told this is built late 14th, 15th, 17th century, depending. But, like, I just don't believe it. It's too beautiful and wonderful. And, yeah, I think that's just about all. There's another place I was looking at. It had this beautiful view. I can't remember where it is. Maybe I Googled it. I don't know. But anyway. Of course, all these places are, like, temporarily closed because of COVID, probably. Here's another one. So the Asfas Kimil. Oh, look at this. The Blue Mosque. This is the one, I think. Yeah, look at that. Look at that. I mean, when you think of a prosperous nation, the height of civilization, the greatest nation on the earth, this is what I think of. Look at this thing. It's beautiful. The interior is just breathtaking. And the view you have over the top of this rooftop out, I mean, you just can't beat that, man. I talk about aesthetics. This is an aesthetic that we should be striving for. People tell me or ask me sometimes, hey, if you could build a church and cost was no object, what would you build a church like? Like this. I'd build a church like this. Why? Because it's awesome. I don't think it'd bring you any closer to God, but man, would it be cool. Yeah. I just love this. I mean, look at the size of this architecture. It's beautiful. All right. Seems like there's... now stroke my ego and do the Hebrews Irish stream. I have to work on that one. I don't have anything prepared for the Hebrew Irish one. I'll tell you that. I'll give you a teaser, okay? Scotland, in the original Scottish tongue, was pronounced Skyland. And the English word sky comes from that. Skyland meaning upper. So here's the teaser. I think the reason we don't see a bunch of huge civilization in Scotland is because the whole nation was a flying city. And in the reset, it broke down and pieces of it came apart. That's why we have ruins here and there and turned all weird. And various castles in Scotland that just don't make much sense. I think it was an entire floating nation, essentially, that floated around Scotland, Skyland. I think it was probably one of the most technologically advanced civilizations, if not the most spiritual. And I think that Israel had a part in that. But that's a more distant kind of link thing. Now, that doesn't really involve the Irish. I think the Irish maybe did their own thing. I don't know. But there's a teaser. Like the whole British Isles, I have a thing for that. But it's not figured out yet. And I don't have it fitted in with the rest of my timeline. So I can't say I believe it, but it's just an interesting concept. And there's some other things that support it, but I'm not going to get into that just yet. I think that's pretty much it for here. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the stream. Thanks for watching, guys. Really appreciate it. And I'll go hopefully edit this video and get it uploaded.